product sense is. This is a framework that was developed by Shreyas Doshi, and he is one of the most prominent and influential, if not the most influential PM advisors out there today. He says it like this: there are 3 elements to product sense. The first one is empathy. The second one is domain knowledge. And the third bucket of product sense is creativity. And the first bucket, empathy, this is all about how well do we know the user? What problem is the user having? What feelings are they having when they're faced with those problems? And how are they reacting to those problems? And then domain knowledge is something that is very specific to that company and to that industry that the company is in. It has to do with who their competitors are, what technology they're using, what are their strengths and weaknesses. And then the third bucket being creativity. This is when the PM comes up with novel ideas and solutions to then address the problem for our users in a way that also makes sense for the company, because we want these creative solutions to be differentiations for the company. Now, some companies out there do not require domain knowledge, because out of the 3, domain knowledge is the easiest to learn. It is a lot harder to learn empathy and creativity. And so a lot of companies out there do not require domain knowledge. Of course, it's a plus, but some companies don't require it. So now there's another thing I want to share, which is product sense questions not only come in different flavors, but also different levels of difficulty. Now, I've conducted over 200 interviews when I was at Meta, and I was also on hiring committees. So based on my own experience, I put these in 3 different buckets based on my experience. The easier bucket of product sense questions is where the user segment is defined in the question already. That makes it simpler to then define a problem and then propose a solution. So an example is build a product to help people find roommates, or build a product to help people find doctors, etc. So notice that the segment, the user segment, is already given to you. It's doctor and patient, right? Or it's people looking for roommates. That means they're not with a family. Well, maybe they're with family, but you know what I mean, right? The user segment is already given to you, so you don't have to segment it in different ways. Then we have the second bucket, which is the medium level. This is where the problem requires some segmentation before you can segment the user. And an example there is we want to build a product for travel, or we want to build a product for health, we want to build a product for sports. Now, this is where the space is really big, and you don't want to just segment the user right away. First, you want to understand what is the problem space. If we're talking about health, what does health mean? Is it physical health? Is it mental health? Is it, if it's mental health, like what aspects of mental health? Why is it important, etc. Right? Once we define and segment the problem space, then we define the users. And then the third bucket, which I think is the hardest level, is where it involves a lot more strategic thinking. This is where you're considering the company's goals, strengths, weaknesses before identifying the problem. After you identify the problem, then you segment it, right? So an example here is if the CEO of the company that you're interviewing for gives you 10 engineers, what would you do? Or if Biden gives you $10 million, what would you do, right? This is where the space is huge. And you can't just like randomly segment. You kind of need to anchor on some kind of strategic thinking. Pick a strength area to focus on, and then you segment it further. So this to me is the hardest level in terms of product sense interview questions. And then the other side of this discussion is, now that you answer the question, how do interviewers assess your answers? They're looking at how you arrived at your target segment. They're looking at how you're defining the problem. And they're also thinking, did you randomly, quote unquote, randomly pick a space to focus on? Is it rooted in some strategic thinking? Is it a sound judgment, right? Did you need the interviewer's help to narrow down the problem space? If so, then you come across more junior compared to someone who could apply some strategic framework and apply sound judgment when they're narrowing down the space. That is where you come across more senior. And notice I'm using the term come across. You're coming across one way, but it doesn't mean that's who you are, right? It doesn't mean that properly represents your skill set as a PM. It has to do with how you're answering the question. And that is why it's so important to prep properly in a way that kind of addresses the questions that the interviewer has. And keep in mind, the reason why they're asking product sense questions is because it gives them a sense on how you make product decisions. Because on the job, you have to make these product calls. And if you're randomly making calls, that's not good for the product, right? It could be the right call, but then you also need to explain why this is important, why this is a priority, why this is the strategy, right? So that is why the product sense interview is so important and so crucial to the PM journey.